I've got a very special guest with me. It's none other than Max Blumenthal. Max, how are you? Max is, of course, the editor at the Grayzone News, and we've got some very, very special things to talk about. How are you, Max? How are you doing?
Yeah, great to see you.
It's great to see you too, man. We've got a crazy couple of things that have been happening in the last week or so, I should say. I mean, I wanted to kind of go through them chunk by chunk. I talked about this a bit last week, which is this sort of weird, bizarre, I don't know if you can call it a study, but, something published by the University of Calgary in Canada, where they basically named you and me and like, what is this list? Candace Owens and Tulsi Gabbard, and they put us all together and called us like Russian influenced accounts. I mean, what does that even mean? First of all, Russian influenced accounts. I'm struggling to understand.
I don't know, because I didn't take the study seriously enough to read it all, but the author of it, who ironically is a professor of peace studies at the University of Calgary, obviously is interested in ramping up war with Russia, has basically taken everyone he considers to be whose opinions he doesn't like on the new Cold War with Russia, and just basically put them on a McCarthyite list with some random data to justify listing everyone. And so I'm listed right behind John Pilger, where John Pilger is a Russian influenced account. That's how he's defined. This is someone who has decades of experience as a documentarian, as a columnist, as an author, who made a film on the new Cold War with China that's pretty balanced. And Pilger doesn't really hide his leftist beliefs. But the idea that John Pilger is Russian influenced and that's all he is, it highlights the complete idiocy behind this study that got published at least in Canada, a major university. I mean, by US standards, I don't know what. It's hard to take anything seriously that's Canadian, especially Justin Trudeau. But
but hold on. You mentioned Trudeau. Sorry if I can just chime in, but one of their prerequisites, one of their criteria for putting us on this list, if you can believe this, is mistrust of Canada's Liberal government and especially Prime Minister Trudeau.
Right, which shows how these cutouts work. I mean, I assume there must have been state funding behind this, and this is. So we have to look at this study as part of the whole disinformation industry. Canada wants to be a junior partner to the U.S. so it can extract some of the imperial benefits that the U.S. provides through its vast military and financial power. And the war now that the U.S. is engaged in is now seen as a hybrid war, or they even call it a Grayzone war in Washington, where a lot of aspects of the war do not rise to the level we're seeing in Ukraine, where there's actual artillery exchanges and infantry battles and so on. And information warfare is openly acknowledged as a key component of the war that needs to be waged. In liberal democracies, information warfare often takes place almost entirely within the domestic sphere by the elites and those they're able to do their gang of useful idiots against the general population, because we have more of a voice here than we would have in a autocratic state. They're afraid of us. And so billions of dollars are flowing into this new disinformation industry, which was launched, in my opinion, by a single speech delivered by one of the biggest losers in recent history, Hillary Clinton, when she lost to Donald Trump. Her first speech after losing, after she lost, she didn't even appear before her own
I remember that.
She sent her chief of staff. So she finally appears, and it's to give a speech on fake news. And prior to that speech, I understood fake news to be basically some like guys sitting in a basement cranking out clickbait stories that weren't necessarily true to draw in, not very sophisticated suburban media consumers so that they could get ad revenue. That was fake news. And then it becomes anything the establishment doesn't like following the Hillary Clinton speech, following the Clinton campaign to drive Russiagate, to gin up this narrative that Trump is secretly controlled by Putin and that Russia is responsible, along with WikiLeaks, for Hillary's loss and not herself and her own decisions and her unappealing politics. And everything has flowed from there.
Right.
Billions of dollars going into universities, think tanks, and to various figures we previously hadn't heard of, and making them into media stars to fight the scourge of disinformation, which we are engaged in right now in their minds because they just don't like what we have to say. It's all about justifying censorship within an ostensible liberal democracy.
I don't know anybody, you, myself, or otherwise, who's legitimized the Russian invasion. That's a very strong word. When you're talking about international relations, you can't just like act like this happened in a vacuum, and act like this is something that Putin invented 2 weeks ago. I mean, this is something the Russians have been saying for 30 years. Like, you learned this in school. It's nothing controversial until 2 months ago. And, I think I speak for all of us when we say we're against war. And the irony is that we are trying to say this whole war was unnecessary because it could have been fixed diplomatically. But they don't like that. Apparently saying that diplomacy is good in foresight, like before things happen, this is not okay. And then they say also that we are portraying NATO as an aggressive alliance. I mean, I don't know about you, Max, but we don't really need to do the work here. I feel like, we don't need to say anything. Before I hand it back to you, down here, they say that basically all of these points, like saying that NATO is an aggressor, they exploded after the Russian invasion, like kind of implying that we've never said this before. Like I've never talked about Russia bombing Ukraine and Ukraine being a war. Like this is something that only then we started talking about NATO. Like we never spoke about Libya, about Syria. It's I don't know what to say to that. It's really astonishing.
Yeah, there is a farcical quality to the work of the supposed counter or self-styled counter disinformation experts, and why? Because they're desperate to justify censorship. They are the ones who are seeking to legitimize something that is deeply undemocratic and which should be off limits in a country or a society that's confident about its system and beliefs. But if you're here in the US and you go outside for a few minutes in any US city, you can see why there's a lack of confidence here in the system. You watch an interview with our president. I mean, he never gets a hardball interview. Just watch him on a late night talk show with Jimmy Kimmel. He can barely finish a sentence. The establishment feels that the walls are closing in, and they're lashing out and swinging at shadows. And we are the shadows because we are the online critics who are scrutinizing what they do, who are gaining large audiences, are able to make a living, and we're not making a living by relying on financing from the foreign enemy. If that were the case, they could easily dismiss us and just say you're done, because that's what they did in an undemocratic fashion to RT, Sputnik, and so on. But so they're now going after their own citizens who express opinions that they think echo those of the Kremlin, even though there has always been a large population, even a majority of people who are opposed to these militaristic, psychotic campaigns by NATO. Now, there are, back to a point you made, there are people within the alternative media world who do support what Russia is doing militarily. They cheerlead for it, and they throw up Z's on their podcasts and whatnot.
Yeah,
I mean they exist. It's completely irrelevant to the point that this guy Butcher, who authored this fake peace professor who authored this study, made, because it's a moral question. That's a moral question. It's irrelevant to disinformation because those people could still be spreading factual information even while making a moral point that the author of this study or others find abhorrent. So that's just irrelevant, unless you don't believe in democracy and you believe people should be silenced because they have immoral opinions, and then you're like, you're everything you claim to hate. I mean, then you're like, that's how progressives think of the right wing and the Christian right, that they go on witch hunts, and that's precisely what this is. Just one other point, because you mentioned that we've always been talking about NATO. We've always been criticizing what they've done in Libya, Syria, Venezuela. I mean, they made Colombia a NATO partner state. That Colombia, this great North Atlantic country.
What a coincidence.
Yeah. Things are different now, though, since that was then and this is now. We are experiencing in Europe and the United States a NATO price hike. It is because of NATO that we are paying unprecedented prices at the pump, and high gas prices cause high food prices because it's harder to ship the food. It's harder for people to heat their homes. It costs more. Being middle class or simply working class is becoming untenable in the West. And that is because of NATO and the decisions that were made in and around Ukraine. But leading up to this, the expansion of NATO to Russia's frontiers and borders. That's the price that we're paying for NATO's economic war. And there's an article I just tweeted out from Bloomberg. It's an amazing article. It's about how the Biden administration is now realizing what me or you, Richard, would have told them months ago, which is that their economic war on Russia and all the sanctions was going to lead to shortages of fertilizer and shortages of food and high gas prices and fuel prices, and that they'd be sanctioning their own population because Russia is not North Korea. It's the 11th biggest economy in the world. And now they're realizing it, these geniuses, and they're trying to evade their own sanctions. It's truly amazing. And so, of course, more and more people are going to be upset about what NATO is doing and despise NATO itself. And that's a welcome development, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think this is one of the first, or should we say a few cases where you're actually having citizens in NATO countries feel a tiny bit of what it is to be under sanctions, or shall we say there's blowback to a certain extent. Usually they sanction Venezuela, no one even feels that, they have no clue what sanctions are, they're living in blissful ignorance, and this is not the case. And to your point, I saw an article from the New York Times, although they're quoting a study, but it's not their research, but the headline is that Russia has made its oil revenue right now is soaring because of the sanctions, like right. and the New York Times in the headline they say despite sanctions, like as if it's not related to it. It's really funny. It's really funny.
Well, the State Department is openly denying. They're going out in the media and openly denying the sanctions have anything to do with it, when everybody knows that's what it is.
Yeah, and I just wanted to go back quickly to this list of these bizarre criteria that they have here. I'm seeing this sentence, and I don't even know what to say to that. It says, quote, promoting a general mistrust in institutions and elites. I mean, isn't that a healthy thing to have? Like, what's wrong with that? I don't get it.
Yeah. No, they sound like, the preacher in the movie, in the movie Footloose, or kind of like some stern square parent from the 1950s. Like, you are causing children to, it's like they're lashing out at Elvis. Like, he's getting our kids to they're doing the jitterbug. They're out there doing the twist.
Smash his records.
Burn his records. It's so ridiculous. And this is something you see across the board in the counter disinformation expert racket. Like, this is something Nina Jankowicz constantly talked about.
Oh.
That what they're fighting is the promotion or encouragement of distrust. And Obama puts it in terms of polarization. I mean, you can see how important this is to the elite to crack down on dissent and skepticism and even cynicism of the elite, when Obama is dedicating all of his time to this one single issue, disinformation.
Yeah.
And it also shows how maniacal they are, because what they want to do is not just hold power. Obama's not running for election now. He wants to control reality.
There's another point on this document where they're talking about suggesting Ukraine is a fascist state or has extensive fascist influences.
The criteria is constantly shifting. A few months or weeks ago, you were not allowed to say that the US was funding biolabs in Ukraine, and now the Defense Department has come out and admitted that it did precisely that. This is a real sensitive point, referring to the integration, the official integration of openly fascist elements that used to basically be soccer hooligans, Patriot of Ukraine. They'd run around beating Roma people and migrants in the street, often with
It's sick.
funding by local municipalities. And they were integrated into the Ukrainian military through the battalions and got training from the US and Canadian military to go to Mariupol and basically control this strategic port city. That's what the Azov battalion had done for 8 years until they were finally defeated in the Azovstal steel factory. And you saw as they were holed up in that steel factory that the entire US media was just like I don't even know what channel I'm on, so I won't be able to use the right metaphor here. I don't know if this is just like for your independent thing.
We're just on YouTube.
Okay, well, it's like a guy who's like been serving a life prison sentence, and he finally gets a conjugal visit, or sees a woman behind the plexiglass. Like they just wanted to explode with orgasmic fascination and love for the Azov battalion, but they couldn't because they knew that they were wearing Wolf's Angle swastika style Nazi insignia on their uniforms, and that they were founded by Andrei Beletsky, who said that his mission was to destroy the Semite-led Untermenschen. He said that as late as 2010. And so the US media was just like, they just had to hold back. They held back. And then finally, they were defeated, and that uncomfortable saga was over. A few people couldn't hold back. They were just like, they are very brave. One thing you can say about them is they're brave. They might be Nazis, but they're brave Nazis. And it brings us to the whole issue of NATO, back to the whole issue of NATO. Who founded NATO? Who took over the BND who set up the BND with the Gestapo's files? I mean, it was Reinhard Gehlen, it was Nazi generals. Who started the US rocket program, the rocketry program?
Yeah, von Braun.
Werner von Braun. I mean, they brought him to Huntsville, Alabama, after he used slave labor to build the V2 rockets for the Nazis, and inside a mountain. They all, these were Jews and people who just died building his maniacal contraptions. So this whole history has kind of come full circle, along with, the history dating back to 1979 and maybe even before, which I wrote about in my book, The Management of Savagery of the US
Right.
Weaponizing jihadists, or, extremist Islamist elements. All of this to weaken its traditional foe in Russia. And so according to this study, you're just not allowed to talk about history, context, or the political reality on the ground in Ukraine. You just have to sit there, Clockwork Orange style, and just obey.
I feel like if you handed this in as a paper, you'd get an F. It's not even just the content, it's just the methodology, the so-called methodology. They don't even define the terms. If you notice, they use Russian disinformation, pro-Russian narratives, disinformation. They use all of these terms interchangeably without ever defining them. So, I mean, that alone is dishonest, because somebody could have a pro-Russian view or spread a pro-Russian narrative and, not be doing disinformation because they genuinely believe in that. They don't have an intent to spread propaganda. Incredible. I don't know what to say. It's just garbage of the highest, of the lowest order, shall we say.
Well, it's cover for the reality, which is that the Western establishment and corporate media are the biggest propagators of disinformation on the planet. In some ways, they have to be, to keep the population in line. Otherwise, they have to impose harsher speech codes and start jailing people if they can't basically hack their brains and control them and shape them into mindless conformists who vote for one of the two management teams every 2 to 4 years. That's what this paper is about. It's academic cover for spreading pro-NATO disinformation. There was an interesting revelation this month It came it came from the Ukrainian, I guess she was sort of the chief information officer or ombudsman. I don't have her name in front of me. Her first name is Ludmila. But she resigned or was forced to resign because the lies and disinformation she was cooking up was just too seamy, and it was starting to freak the Zelensky administration out. Kept pushing this lie of Russians raping Ukrainian children, and they couldn't back it up with any evidence. Surely they could have come up with some evidence of other Russian crimes and other atrocities committed by Russian soldiers. I mean, they were able to make a pretty plausible case around Bucha, but that wasn't enough. And she admitted to lying. She admitted to making up the whole thing, which was widely reported in the US media about mass rape. And she said, well, I just needed to do what was necessary to get us more weapons and to keep this war going on, to make sure that we could continue to fight, which is exactly what every US-backed opposition movement has ever done. That's precisely what the White Helmets existed to do in Syria. That's what the Libyan opposition did to convince Hillary Clinton to intervene. They said this is going to be a new Rwanda when they met her in a meeting brokered by pseudo-philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy. These are the disinformation artists that this paper aims to cover for by making sure that no one hears from us. And for the first time, I've had a YouTube video taken down. It wasn't because we were spreading disinformation. It was because we were spreading facts that were inconvenient. No one even disputes that. We were basically all we were doing was talking about emails from one of the most famous journalists in the UK, discussing collaboration with UK state operatives and intelligence to neutralize the UK left. And that was why we had our video taken offline. So that's what this is all about. It's about censorship. It's about keeping the population stupid, disinformed, and de-democratizing our societies. And the people behind it deserve the highest level of contempt. I mean, if we're going to stand here and stay in our societies and fight and not run away into exile and not give up, then we should turn our ire on these people and know who they are, because they like to hide behind institutions or honeycombed within the permanent national security bureaucracy. They're not running for election. Their names are not very well known. But for the first time, we played a part in making a major national controversy out of one of them, and saw to it that she was held accountable for the lies she had told. I'm talking about Nina Jankowicz. And we need to keep the pressure on, because her replacement is an even more devious figure in Michael Chertoff, first head of the DHS, who advanced the Patriot Act, the first, the birth of the massive post 9/11 security state, the war in Iraq, and then went out and profiteered off of the phony war on terror that he helped manufacture.
I don't understand these people, because if they wanted to expose Russian disinformation campaigns, I'm sure they exist, like actual things that are being run by the Kremlin. They don't do that, though. They're going and attacking people that they disagree with politically at home and dubbing them, accusing them of being so-and-so, XYZ. Today it's Russian, tomorrow it's Chinese. And you pointed about to how they're making up these wild crimes about Russia right now. I feel like I shouldn't have to say this because it's so obvious. Russian soldiers are not perfect. I've talked about myself here on the channel of one of the most banal war crimes to begin with, which is filming prisoners of war, which you're not allowed to do. It's a violation of the Geneva Convention. So if they want to talk about Russian war crimes and they want to look for them, they might very well find them. Every single army in every war commits them. And I'm not saying it makes it okay. I'm just saying that they don't actually talk about real war crimes. They make them up. And that's the whole problem. If anything, it does them a disservice. It does the cause that they're pretending to fight for a disservice. But of course, we know that they're not in it for that. I wanted to just show you this bizarre figure, this map, and you'll know what I'm talking about. It looks like another one that I'm going to show in a bit. But, they've basically put Fox News in the middle here. I don't even know what that means. And they're saying Fox News is like the most balanced of all between McFowl and like myself, or Aaron Mate or WikiLeaks or Glenn Greenwald. Like Glenn Greenwald is right next to RT. I don't know what this whole thing means. I really don't know. It's just so bizarre. They talk about colors. They say like Russian disinformation campaigns in red. There is no color red. This is just garbage, like really garbage. They just put a bunch of names together and, say that they're spreading the same views or something. Honestly, though, I have to admit I'm disappointed in your score because I got a top score and you're all the way down here. So, you got to you got to do better, Max. You have to. Those are rookie numbers. Because I was talking about this with you guys the other day, and I did a whole video on it. But Max is also obviously named on the list. They've got Tulsi Gabbard as well. She has the highest score.
Yeah, my score is low because I do things other than tweet, and so he's only rating my Twitter account and not anything else I do, like what I write or what I say. That's another flaw in these studies is they just focus on one platform. So I'm not as prolific on Twitter as other people because I'm editing a site and doing live streams and writing and so on. And there's nuance there that they're not going to be able to map. It's so much easier to deal with Twitter.
But you mentioned you had a video taken down for the first time. This is the tweet that you posted just a few hours ago. You said that, again, I think you're going to have to break this one down because it's so confusing. Did I understand this correctly? They removed a video that you posted and then reversed that decision and then removed it again a second time. Is that correct?
Yep.
And what's it about? What's all this about?
Well, we have exposed, as I mentioned before, Paul Mason, one of the most famous, ostensibly left-wing journalists in the UK, who has been obsessed with pushing from the left for the West to militarily intervene against Russia in support of the Ukrainian military and do everything else in its power to counter Russia, and has been simultaneously attacking everyone on the left, the entire British grassroots left, as well as us at the Grayzone, for disagreeing with him. And he even called in a column in the New Statesman for us at the Grayzone for state action against us. So he wasn't really
state action, right?
Yeah, he wasn't really soft pedaling what he was doing, but we subsequently were able to obtain leaked emails that between Paul Mason, an intelligence contractor named Amil Khan, who was active in the Syrian dirty war, works with the British state extensively, funded by USAID, to do counter disinformation work, exactly what we've been talking about this whole time, and a secretive figure named Andy Price, who was the founder of the British version of what Nina Jankowicz was trying to do at the Department of Homeland Security. It's called the Counter Disinformation and Media Development Unit within the British Foreign Office. And Mason and him and Khan were going back and forth about how to destroy independent anti-imperialist media, talking about taking out the Grayzone, having an anti-Grayzone summit in London, including Bellingcat, who Mason referred to revealingly and factually as intelligence by proxy. Basically saying they're just a proxy of British and U.S. intelligence.
Just a second, because I've not been following this whole saga online. I think that the head of this Bellingcat, he has me blocked for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But doesn't it go something like this, that they have been accused of being a cutout of the Western intelligence agencies, and then they've said no? And what you're telling me is that in these emails, that when they're talking in private, they refer to Bellingcat as being exactly what it's denied all along. Is that correct?
Yep, the emails spell it out because Mason is proposing Bellingcat function as a seemingly organic group that is actually connected to British intelligence and doing the work of British intelligence, but with plausible deniability and this sort of open source collective veneer. So that was pretty embarrassing for Bellingcat. They were furious at him, furious that he would call him that, and he had to kind of issue an apology, calling them 100% grassroots, and it's been amazing to see this play out. But the most damning emails are between Paul Mason and Andy Price, who is a British intelligence official, and they're not only talking about taking down independent outlets. Paul Mason conceived this mind map of the grassroots UK left that links everyone, any institution or figure you can think of associated with the UK left, with Jeremy Corbyn at the center, links them all to the Chinese and Russian governments. Just completely manic and paranoid material flowing from the mind of Paul Mason, who's been really put forward by the British media as the left celebrity journalist and the supporter of Corbyn. And so he was running for parliament on the Labour ticket.
Right.
He was trying to leverage his left celebrity into a seat in parliament to wage his battle for Ukraine and against disinformation from Westminster. He has been deselected since our first story came out, and our second story is even more damning. So I don't see any political future for him. In any case, to answer your question with all this background, me and Aaron Mate, my colleague at the Grayzone, who was also targeted by Mason, we had a 2.5 hour discussion of all the emails, just like we're talking right now. And it was removed by YouTube yesterday at around 12 p.m. Eastern time on the grounds of bullying and harassment. And so I protested. I appealed to YouTube and said there was no bullying and harassment. Any human review will clearly demonstrate that we were the ones being bullied and harassed by someone with state connections at the least, and that YouTube should not be participating in the suppression of independent voices who are not violating its terms of use. And so the video 35 minutes later went back up, and I got a message from YouTube telling me, you did not violate our terms of use. We're very sorry about this. Thank you for your appeal. And then 20 minutes later, they took the video down again and said, we're very sorry. You are participating in bullying and harassment. This is, your final warning. There's one, Aaron, I don't know what happened to Aaron's podcast, but yesterday it was all of his episodes were removed from Apple, including that one. But there's one email from Andy Price from the UK Foreign Office where he boasts about telling YouTube to remove, in his words, Russian stuff and getting them to do it. So I would assume it was someone like that or someone connected to him who just simply told YouTube what to do, which shows you how undemocratic this whole system is.
Right. I think I know which email you're talking about. Yeah, they're talking about a Putin proxy watch. Tell us about that.
Yeah. This is an insane proposal by Paul Mason to his intelligence buddy, Andy Price. And he's basically calling for a Putin proxy watch website, which would function like Canary Mission, if anyone's familiar with the site that names and shames anyone who participates in Palestine solidarity activity in college to prevent them from getting employment. This would do the same thing for British citizens who Paul Mason believes are echoing Kremlin disinformation, which, is highly undemocratic. He was also proposing setting up a information warfare operation using special effects to sensationalize Russian atrocities, to use prisoner confession videos, even though it's unethical, as you mentioned, to move the British public in support of war for Ukraine, and to end libel laws so that no one who is a foreign enemy can sue. So it makes it easier to smear them. So basically, to get rid of British speech laws, to create an exception in British speech laws for anyone he wants to target around the issue of Ukraine.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. If I understood this correctly, he's suggesting in these emails that these be suspended for quote unquote foreign agents. How do you know who's a foreign agent? Right.
Well, he thinks everyone's a foreign agent. I mean, he asked Andy Price, his intelligence connection, to go and investigate Low Key, the British rapper, Black Alliance for Peace, and Ali Vargas, the British Bolivian reporter from Casa Chun News, who's covering Bolivia, just because they pointed out racial double standards around the fulsome Western support for Ukraine, and investigate them. He called Ali Vargas a proxy, so he thinks everyone is some kind of foreign agent, especially us at the Grayzone. He sought to instrumentalize the British government to launch an investigation into us to prove that Russia was secretly controlling us. So this is not a stable individual. This is not even a stable genius. This is a paranoid, blithering idiot who occupies the heights of British media still, and has faced no accountability for this. The British media have not touched this story.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the biggest media scandals of the year, period.
The emails, I saw the statement that he put out. Did he deny their accuracy? Has there been any sort of effort for him to comment on what you said when you reached out? Because I think you said you reached out there are two pieces, right? And I think you said you reached out. He wouldn't comment on them?
No, he would not. And Amil Khan would not respond to a request for comment either. And we didn't quite know in the beginning that Andy Price was on these threads until Amil Khan protested that he wasn't. We had attributed certain emails to him, and he said it wasn't me. So that was the only mistake we made here. We authenticated it. So the correction we had to make actually made the piece more damning, because those emails were between Paul Mason and Andy Price of the UK Foreign Office. And it showed that Mason was not only colluding with a senior intelligence official who has operated behind a veil of secrecy, but that he may have even he has been handled, that he may have even had a handler. So yeah, they're real. They're 100% real. There's no doubt about it. They're more real than we could even imagine, because I can't even believe some of the stuff that's said.
When you read it, you're quite taken aback. I just wanted to chime in quickly, say for the viewers, because a lot of the times we see the word FCO mentioned. That's a Foreign and Commonwealth Office, so it's the UK's equivalent of the State Department. Right. And it is quite intriguing, because what I'm seeing from the emails here is like you said, it's not just about, the content itself, which suggests that the Grayzone and other left journalists, and there's a whole chart or map that I wanted to show in a second, should be, how should we put this diplomatically, dealt with. But on top of it, it's who this is being told to, who this is being discussed with. That's what gives this so much weight. Because, if I tell my cat, I don't like this and this journalist, it's very different than going and working with the state apparatus and saying we should take care of this and this person or organization, right? And I see here that they've mentioned Black Alliance for Peace, as you said, and there's this whole I don't know what to call this this whole thing over here where they have the Muslim community, they have the young network left,
this is
labor
crazy.
left, trade unions. Please walk us through this. And what is this, Max?
Well, to the left, you have the foreign enemy states, China and Russia. Then you have those who Paul Mason believes are their proxies, moving from left to right. And at the center is Jeremy Corbyn. So everything supportive of Corbyn, connected to Corbyn, is surrounding him. And then all the way to the right are the constituencies of labor that Paul Mason believes have been infected with Chinese and Russian thinking. And he obviously considers them threats or useful idiots. The young network left, but then the Muslim community, the Black community, really, really worked up about those constituencies' opposition to or lack of enthusiasm for World War III. So he thinks that what he's suggesting here is that the entire left, all those figures in the middle, have to be neutralized to save the constituencies on the right from the foreign enemies on the left. And that means suspending democracy. It means McCarthyism. This is Orwellian in a sense, because George Orwell did the same thing. He would have dinner with his buddies and people who thought were his buddies, everyone from, Paul Robeson to Charlie Chaplin would come into contact with him, and then he'd write memos about them to the British intelligence services and security services on who's a communist and who isn't. He snitched out Paul Robeson. But here you have Paul Mason snitching out the entire Black community. It should be like, as I said, this is one of the biggest media scandals of the year, and the British press will not touch it.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. And again, just to sort of lay this out even more clearly, because there were two articles that you published. There was the first piece, the first introduction to this, and then the second one where you started going more into the emails with Price. And yeah. Again, because this is a lot to take in, but it is something that I think people should definitely sit down and read through, because it really it's hard to encapsulate how big this is. They're basically saying that the whole left community, left journalists, that we are all working for the Russians or some foreign state, and yet here in the emails it appears to show him working with the British state. Like, isn't that ironic? Isn't that completely ironic? Like, can you imagine that we're writing to officials at the Russian foreign ministry, asking about this? I mean, this is obscene, right? Like,
or like asking them, can you go hack this guy? Get us those emails. Like, if we did that, that would be a crime.
Yeah.
But yeah, if we were plotting with any foreign official to do the kind of things that Paul Mason did with domestic officials, it would be an international scandal, and we would be jailed as high-level traitors for possibly decades. So, but Mason is still, I mean, aside from not being able to stand as a Labour candidate, it doesn't seem like he's facing accountability from his peers in the British mainstream press. No one seems to be upset with him, because this is how business is conducted. I mean, he's gone a little bit further. He seems to have gotten bored with his life, as a tech reporter, and he wrote a book about how smartphones would drive the revolution. He seems to have gotten a little bit bored with this, and he wants to be a character in a Jean le Carré novel. And he uses all of this phony intelligence speak. It's highly pretentious. We need to have white phones and use clean, encrypted email accounts like Proton Mail, top OPSEC, Matryoshka approach to masking, working through cutouts. Like, it's pathetic in a way, but it's also very dangerous, because there's no depth to his malevolence, and he clearly does have connections to influential people who are capable of telling YouTube what to remove.
Yeah, hold on. You actually mentioned just now the encrypted email and Proton Mail. This is something I wanted to ask you about, because almost all of the emails no, not all of them, but many of them, shall we say, that he is sending and receiving, you can see in the bottom it says sent with iOS with Proton Secure Mail. How secure is this exactly if all the emails ended up being leaked? And, he talks about being secure, but then there's this. I'm struggling to understand.
Look, I have no idea how these emails got out there. Paul Mason said it was a hack and dump operation. And the Bellingcat guys, Nick Waters from Bellingcat, actually mocked him and said, "You don't know how to even use two-factor authentic." He said, "Oh, he's
Really?
a Walter Mitty type." He said, "This is a Walter Mitty type who doesn't even know how to use two-factor authentication." So that's their theory, was that he got phished and didn't even know how to protect his own email account. But I have no idea what happened or what took place. So obviously, Mason. We can assume that Mason isn't really an expert at OPSEC, and I mean he's spent a lot of time focusing on people who actually are organically, independently expressing democratically protected opinions. So I don't know what he thinks he can accomplish here, except for just suspension of democracy, total emergency law, and just stamping out all dissent.
And Max, just again, I think it's really important to drive this point home that they are mentioning, basically, shall we say, vindicating, confirming that there are cutouts in the British government in the West that were participating in an information war on Syria. And, you know, the Integrity Initiative, that's also mentioned in here. We kind of went through this 2 years ago, I think it was, when we had those leaks about Syria. But now they've kind of vindicated those reports once again and kind of, just basically confirmed it.
Yeah, and I got to go after this, but we've been covering this story for a while. We've been covering leaked emails, which have been actually in many cases publicly available. We didn't have any special, relationship with anyone or anything. Many of these emails were just out there on the internet, and for the rest of the media didn't want to report on it. And probably wasn't capable of synthesizing it the way a reporter like Kit Clarenberg, who has done masterful work on these two pieces, is able to do. And there are other pieces by Kit Clarenberg about just mind-blowing intelligence intrigues that are almost that could arguably be responsible for the rise and fall of Boris Johnson's government. If you look at our site right now, Operation Surprise is another really important piece Kit wrote. But the point is, we've been publishing these for years, starting with our reporting on the Integrity Initiative, which was another leak of emails from a cloak and dagger British state operation posing behind the cover of a legitimate think tank called the Institute for Statecraft. And this organization covertly involved journalists, politicians, and British military intelligence officials in an operation to promote pro-new Cold War propaganda focused heavily on Ukraine, and to destroy the careers of those politicians and journalists who got in their way, much as Paul Mason has been doing. And in fact, Paul Mason and Andy Price in these emails openly propose, and well, it's not openly, they're privately discussing this, an International Information Brigade, which was essentially Integrity Initiative 2.0. That's what Kit Clarenberg's second piece focuses on. And why is this dangerous? Because it's using taxpayer money to act against British citizens in a covert fashion, using what Mason himself calls intelligence cutouts, or a Russian nesting doll approach, where it appears to be legitimate and organic in public, but in reality is run by state intelligence with no citizen accountability. So no one can be a bigger threat to democracy than Paul Mason. No Russian FSB officer can do to democracy what Paul Mason can get away with, because he had been a highly respected journalist and British citizen capable of getting away with this stuff and plying government to his ends. And that's why it was so important for us to publish this and to tell the story of how the intelligence services have been targeting all of us, anti-war and anti-imperialist dissenters in the media, using their fronts and their assets. We've known this was going on for years, but now we have the proof. And so it really feels like vindication. To some extent, it feels like justice, but we have to do more to hold these people accountable in the media. And that means that, it's just why it's so important that you're hosting this discussion, and, everyone needs to get involved and make noise, because mainstream press won't hold their own accountable.
No, they won't. They certainly won't. Max, where can people read the articles? It's a rhetorical question, but where can they follow you and find more of your work? I've got your Twitter up on the screen.
Yeah, the articles are at thegrayzone.com. That's gray with an A, and everyone else knows where to find me.
All right, lovely.
You can find me in a University of Calgary study.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. Well, if we're being put on those lists, I suspect we're doing something right. In any case, as always, great to speak with you, Max, and appreciate all the work you're doing. Thanks for your time, and we'll have you on back soon again.
Thanks for what you do, Richard.
Thank you.
Good talking to you.
Take care. Bye-bye, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.